It's a beautiful day in a bustling mountain village, where the sun is high and the streets are crowded. Inside the local tavern, the air is thick with the sound of patrons sharing stories and gossip. A guy across the room catches his friend's eye and waves him over. A traveling merchant finally sits down, looking exhausted after spending the last few months in Nanman. He immediately starts venting about the miserable heat and the strange bugs he had to deal with. He orders some wine and asks if there's been any juicy news from the Central Plains while he was gone. The bald patron gives him a smug look, reminding him that good information usually comes with a price. He eventually reveals that the youngest daughter of the legendary Sichuan Tang clan has just made her debut. Tang Sowol is rumored to be an incredible beauty, with skills that live up to her family's name. They start talking about the poison spirit body, a mythical constitution that many wonder if it even exists. In the corner, the protagonist quietly eats while the men mention that Sowol is traveling alone, making her a prime target. Hearing enough, he sets his chopsticks down on the table with a firm tap. He calls over the waiter to compliment the food before asking for a batch of dumplings to go. With his package in hand, the man slips out of the tavern and heads toward the mountains. A man with a deep scar watches him leave, sensing he isn't just another traveler. Deep in a secluded valley, the peaceful landscape hides a secret hidden away from prying eyes. Ghost Blade walks through the forest, thinking about how those tavern rumors were surprisingly accurate. He approaches a dark cave opening, knowing that a noble daughter like her is never truly alone in the Murim. He steps into the shadows of the cave, carrying the food and a very specific plan for his captive. He looks down at the corner where he's keeping the girl he took from her family. Tang Sowol is tied up on the cave floor, gagged with a bamboo bit and unable to escape. She looks up at him with eyes full of terror and a whole lot of fire. The protagonist admits that just yesterday, he kidnapped her right out from under her guards. Outside, the full moon hangs in the sky, marking the start of a long night. A drop hits a pool of blood as he reflects on the life he lived before he regressed. Back then, he was known by many names, like the Blood Wolf. But to most, he was the Ghost Blade, a man who left a trail of bodies across every battlefield. He first picked up a sword decades ago, not for glory, but just because he was hungry. He eventually reached the Transcendence realm through nothing but self-study and a lack of mercy. He wasn't hungry anymore, but he was constantly hunted by the grudges he'd forged in steel. He was resigned to a life of paying for his sins as a killer for hire. That all changed when a man calling himself the Heavenly Demon appeared on the scene. The guy was a force of nature that set the entire Central Plains on fire. He was the strongest man in history, wiping out anyone and everyone who stood in his way. It was in that dying world of fire and blood that the protagonist finally met her. Sowol was the only survivor left of the Tang clan, and he was a man who had nothing left to lose. They didn't need a grand reason to become close, while everything around them was burning down. Standing in a mansion under the moonlight, she asks him if he really has to leave her side. She reminds him of her family's absolute rule, to repay kindness twofold and vengeance tenfold. He looks at her, knowing the duty of revenge for her fallen family is the only thing driving her now. She smiles, teasing that the person he used to be would have argued that her life mattered more than any rule. He looks away, knowing his words won't change a heart that's already decided on a suicide mission. Tang Sowol looks at him, telling him her motive for fighting isn't just about getting even. The protagonist looks back, promising that with his strength he can at least keep her safe. She told him that more than anything, she just wanted to live. He interrupted her, asking if he could finally see her face clearly. He reaches out, gently brushing her long white hair away from her eyes. Underneath, her skin is covered in a horrific burn, the mark of the poison that almost took her life. Under the light of the full moon, they stand together in a rare moment of peace. She blushes and tells him it's embarrassing when he just stares at her like that. She looks him in the eye, her expression softening as she shares her feelings. He tries to talk her out of it, but she refuses to stay behind while he risks everything. The protagonist tells her straight up, A world without her is a world he has no confidence in living in. Sowol is stunned by his sudden confession, her mouth falling open in shock. The heavy atmosphere breaks when she starts laughing, finding his comparison to a field of dung hilarious. She looks at him with a gentle smile, feeling like she finally truly understands him. He takes her hand, nodding that they both seem to be changing as they get to know each other. They share a quiet connection as they stand together on the balcony. Sowol starts pulling him along, telling him to follow her. She flashes a bright smile and says she's taking him back to her room. He looks completely flustered by her forwardness, having a lot to talk about. The view pulls back to show the massive Tang clan estate hidden away in the mountains. They sit together under the night sky, watching the clouds pass by the moon. She mentions that once the buildings are rebuilt, it'll be a great chance for a fresh start. He looks at her, listening to her dreams for a new pavilion and a peaceful future. She makes him promise that next time, they'll watch the moon together from that new building. He smiles, truly believing for a second that they might actually make it. The full moon shines brightly through the dark clouds. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a nightmare, a gaping wound in someone's chest. On a blood-soaked battlefield, the dream of a peaceful life is torn apart in an instant. Ghost Blade looks on in horror, his entire world crumbling around him. Sowol is mortally wounded, her clothes stained red as she collapses into his arms. She looks up at him and dies with a gentle smile, finally finding peace in the middle of the war. He lets out a guttural scream as her life force fades away completely. Pure rage takes over as he lunges at the enemy with everything he has left. He swings his blade with desperate force, determined to kill the one who took her from him. The shadow of his enemy looms over him like a final death sentence. Blood sprays across the ground as the battle reaches its brutal conclusion. He realizes too late that all their promises were just empty dreams in a world of violence. None of his efforts reached her. They were both destined to die in the dirt. The protagonist lies face down, his own life draining into the pool of blood from his sins. In his final moments, he regrets not being strong enough or having enough time to save her. He wonders if things could have been different, but his regrets are scattered in the wind. Suddenly, he's jolted awake, gasping for air as he breaks the surface of a freezing lake. Ghost Blade gasps for air, crawling out of the water after his sudden regression. He stares at his hands, trying to make sense of the miracle that just happened. "What the hell is this?" he mutters, shocked by his youthful reflection. He realizes that he has been given a second chance at life in a familiar past. He begins a grueling training regimen, using his past knowledge to rapidly grow stronger. He crushes the local gangs and takes their money to fund his new path. This path eventually leads him to Tang Sowol, whom he has captured and hidden. He looks at her with a somber expression, haunted by the memories of her future. Tang Sowol glares at him, her mouth firmly blocked by a bamboo gag. He notes that in her younger days, she looks much different than he remembers. She makes muffled, angry noises, clearly outraged by her situation. He finally removes the gag, letting her speak for the first time since her capture. She immediately starts spitting and coughing, her face twisted in a scowl. He tells her there's no point in screaming, as they are deep within a mountain cave. Sowol demands to know his goal and warns him about the might of the Tang clan. He tells her she can speak casually, since he's actually younger than her. She doesn't believe him, calling him an old master who has achieved rejuvenation. She mocks him, accusing him of being a kidnapper with a weird fetish. Her face turns red as she asks if his ultimate goal is to violate her body. Annoyed, he forces the bamboo gag back into her mouth to keep her quiet. "Are you always this talkative?" he asks as she continues to muffle her protests. He clarifies that he is really 15 and isn't some ancient martial arts master. He explains that he didn't kidnap her to harm her, but to keep her safe. Sowol asks who she needs protection from, as she doesn't believe her life is in danger. She shouts that no one would dare touch a direct descendant of the Tang clan. He tells her she'll understand soon enough and should just stay quiet for now. He remembers that around this time, she was ambushed by enemies of her clan. In that life, her face was melted off when she used a dangerous poison to survive. It was a tragedy that haunted her forever, and he plans to stop it this time. Sowol smirks, suspecting that he has a hidden motive for keeping her alive. She tells him she's not naive enough to trust him and plans to escape. Ghost Blade sighs, remembering just how incredibly stubborn she's always been. She warns him of the consequences if he tries anything inappropriate with her. He sits down, telling her he won't stop her if she really wants to try and run. He mocks her current skill level, telling her she'll just waste her energy. "What did you say?" she snaps, clearly insulted by his lack of respect. He challenges her to undo the pressure points he placed on her if she's so confident. Sowol looks away, frustrated by the realization that she's currently powerless. She turns her back to him and starts struggling against the ropes with all her might. She grunts and sweats, but the knots and pressure points refuse to yield. "Is something wrong?" he asks, watching her futile struggle. She pauses, looking defeated, as she realizes she can't undo his technique. Ghost Blade gives a small, mocking smile, as he asks why he would ever release someone who is clearly planning to run away. Tang Sowol hangs her head, her face flushed with exertion and a growing sense of helplessness. Her pride finally buckles under the pressure of her physical needs, and she quietly asks him to hand her a chamber pot. Ghost Blade stares back at her with a blank, unreadable expression, his silence speaking volumes. High above the cave, the midday sun shines brightly through the dense canopy of the mountain forest. A nearby waterfall cascades down the rocky cliffs, its constant roar the only sound in the peaceful wilderness. Standing just outside the dark entrance of the cave, Ghost Blade watches the perimeter for any signs of pursuit. He eventually folds his arms across his chest, looking awkward as he wonders what on earth he's supposed to do with the pot. The sun continues its slow journey across the vast blue sky, casting long shadows over the rugged mountain peaks. Ghost Blade reflects on their situation, realizing that their relationship in this life has already reached a point where things can never be normal again. Breaking the silence of the cave, Sowol shouts at him, her hunger finally getting the better of her remaining patience. Ghost Blade turns his head toward her, his expression showing a mixture of boredom and mild annoyance. The two of them sit in the middle of the cavern, surrounded by cold stone and the echoes of their own voices. He casually mentions that he has some fastness pills, but Sowol is immediately outraged, declaring that they don't count as real food. He tries to defend the pills, explaining that they're actually quite filling if you take the time to soak them in water. Sowol begins to wail in frustration, demanding to know why he stopped bringing back the delicious dumplings and hasn't even provided gruel lately. Ghost Blade looks at her with a serious gaze, his thoughts shifting back to the tactical side of their encounter. He asks if she remembers the methods he used to subdue her during the kidnapping, and she dryly notes that at least he admits to the crime. Sowol wonders aloud why he's bringing up the painful memory of her poison and hidden weapons, failing to leave even a scratch on him. He pushes the conversation further, asking her to really think about how a supposed 15-year-old could possibly withstand the Tang clan's legendary poisons. She admits she initially thought he was a rejuvenated master with high resistance, but he firmly repeats that he really is just 15. Desperate for a logical answer, Sowol asks if he managed to protect himself by using an absurd amount of expensive poison-avoiding pearls. Ghost Blade counters her question by asking if she even has a clue about the actual market price for a single poison-avoiding pearl. Sowol's eyes widen as she tries to recall the price, estimating that about 5 pearls should cost roughly 1 silver tael. Tang Sowol narrows her eyes as she studies her captor. She's starting to piece together a theory that she definitely doesn't like. Ghost Blade stays quiet, but he's clearly feeling the pressure of her intense, suspicious gaze. The great assassin finally breaks the silence with a confession. He's completely flat broke. It's not exactly the intimidating reveal Sowol expected. He tosses his empty money pouch onto the floor. It hits the stone with a hollow, depressing thud. The noble girl asks for the numbers, and he admits he only started with 4 silver taels. It's practically peanuts for a mission like this. Then comes the embarrassing part. Ghost Blade spent half of his budget on special pearls just to keep her poison from killing him. Survival isn't cheap. He explains his grand plan was to hide out for a month, but they've already burned through 2 weeks of time and money. Sowol is absolutely floored. She can't believe she was kidnapped by a man with zero financial literacy. She starts ripping into him, asking if he traded all his brain cells for martial arts. It's a pretty fair critique, all things considered. He just plugs his ears while she yells. He figures as long as the sky hasn't fallen, there's still a way to fix this mess. Exasperated, she tells him to drop the foolishness and just use the money pouch she's been carrying the whole time. Ghost Blade looks genuinely stunned. If she had cash on her, he really wishes she'd mentioned it before they started starving. She gives him a flat, judging look. She's clearly unimpressed with her captor's common sense. When he asks where the stash is, she tells him it's in her waistband and asks him to untie her so she can reach it. He isn't that naive. He stands up and tells her he'll just help himself to the pouch. He leans in close, ignoring any sense of personal space. Sowol freezes up as his face nears hers. He starts rummaging around her back, complaining that all her hidden needles and weapons are getting in the way. Sowol turns bright red, stuttering that the pouch is tucked into the back right side. She squeezed her eyes shut, looking as if she wanted to vanish into the cave wall from sheer embarrassment as he reached over to search for it. With her face burning, she begs him to just find it faster and end the awkwardness. Finally, he pulls out a fancy silk pouch decorated with gold flowers. The Tang clan clearly doesn't do things cheaply. Ghost Blade is impressed by the weight of the gold. Behind him, Sowol has completely curled into a ball of shame. She finds enough energy to call him a lecherous old demon, but he just lets the insult slide. He prepares to head to the village for supplies and asks if she needs anything. She isn't buying his generous act since it's her money anyway. Sowol starts rattling off a list of demands, starting with actual bedding for the hard floor and some fresh clothes. Most importantly, she wants real food, specifically not those dreadful dumplings he keeps buying. He actually thought they were delicious. The girl mocks his taste buds, saying they must be ruined from years of eating survival pills. He reminds her that she's a captive and should probably just be grateful for whatever he brings back. As he walks away, she screams after him, begging for literally anything except more of those dumplings. Ghost Blade makes his way down to the mountain village, taking in the view of a world he once lost. He blends into the market crowd, picking up supplies with his newly borrowed budget. He stays alert while walking, knowing the ambush on Sowol is inevitable, even if he doesn't have the exact date. He's determined to keep her safe for at least a month, no matter what. He even grabs another fresh box of those dumplings. Back at the cave, Sowol admits she doesn't fully trust his protection yet, but she senses he isn't a bad person. He starts feeding her one of the dumplings with chopsticks, a surprisingly domestic moment for a kidnapper and his target. She asks if he knows her, nodding that he seems to have all the answers while she knows nothing about him. She offers a small smile, suggesting that getting to know each other is the only way they'll build any real trust. Ghost Blade looks away, his mind drifting back to a version of her from a life he lived once before. He remembers a woman from his past life who used to tell him those exact same words all the time. To him, the girl in the cave and the woman from his memories are completely different people. But as he looks at her, he can't help but smile. She's still the same person at her core. As he walks through the woods with his haul, his senses suddenly spike. He isn't alone anymore, the enemies have arrived. Deep in a secluded valley, a hidden cave sits nestled among the jagged mountain rocks. Ghost Blade presents a vibrant, purple flower to his captive, holding it with a steady hand. Sowol looks at the flower, her expression unreadable as she stares at the gift. She gets flustered, muttering that receiving flowers is a bit much since they aren't exactly on friendly terms. He tells her to stop making assumptions and just listen. The assassin identifies it as purple flower poison refining grass, causing Sowol's eyes to go wide with shock. Ghost Blade figures she probably knows more about this rare plant than he does, given her clan's specialty. She explains that it doubles the toxicity of poison and is something any poison artist would die to get their hands on. Still stunned, she asks where on earth he managed to find such a valuable treasure. In his past life, Sowol was the one who actually found it while she was running for her life from an attack. He knew it was around here and had been planning to look for it. He tells her he just got lucky and spotted it on his way back, making it sound like he just found a pretty weed. He hands it over and asks if she can absorb its power, but she's still stuck on the fact that he's giving away something so priceless. Then she asks how he even knew about her poisoned spirit body. Ghost Blade shrugs it off, saying her secret isn't exactly well kept, though very few understand what that body is actually capable of. Sowol decides it's too late to start questioning things now. She prepares herself to take the herb, looking focused as the moment of truth approaches. Sowol begins to lick the petals of the purple flower, starting the process of refining its toxic properties. She continues to carefully ingest the herb, her cheeks flushing slightly from the intensity of the spiritual grass. After a few bites, she pauses to taste it, seemingly surprised by the quality of the find. She mumbles that it's high quality and should take about a month to fully absorb. Ghost Blade is surprised it'll take that long. He looks at her, a bit taken aback by the long timeline of her training. Sowol explains that poison arts aren't some magic trick where you just swallow something and get stronger instantly. He admits that makes sense. She then switches gears, asking if there's something else he should give her first, since eating a poisonous herb on an empty stomach is a recipe for a disaster. Ghost Blade holds up a box of the same dumplings from last time, asking if they're still okay. Sowol's grumpy expression says it all. Suddenly she does a full pivot, chirping that she was actually craving dumplings and this is perfect. He just goes along with her mood swing. The assassin sits on the floor and starts feeding her with chopsticks, realizing they're going to be stuck here for a while. Sowol chews thoughtfully as he watches her. He remembers how in his past life, she rushed her power and ended up with a permanently disfigured face. He looks away, lost in his own thoughts about the future he's trying to change. His hand stops mid-motion, the chopsticks frozen as his internal monologue takes over. Sowol looks at him, confused by the sudden pause in their meal. She calls out to her young hero, pointing out that he's stopped feeding her. He tells her to just hold on a second. Ghost Blade's face goes cold as he looks toward the cave entrance. His sharp eyes have caught a shift in the air. He apologizes for stopping the meal so early and tells Sowol to start absorbing that spiritual herb right this second. She's understandably worried now. He stares into the shadows of the cave, his expression hardening as he senses the presence of intruders. Outside, a group of armed men has surrounded the cave entrance, their blades drawn and ready for a fight. It seems the day he feared has finally arrived. Leading the pack is the 100-kill Blade Wanderer, a scarred warrior with a deadly gaze. The first real test of this new life is standing right at the door. High in the mountains of Sichuan, a heavy silence hangs over the peaks. A group of mercenaries is closing in, scouring the area for their targets. They look like they've survived more than a few life-or-death battles. The whole group moves toward the cave, where Ghost Blade and Sowol have been hiding. Ghost Blade leads Sowol out into the open, his hand already resting on his weapon. Sowol looks like she's ready to bolt, but the boy remains perfectly still. She's stunned that he wants her to start absorbing the poison grass right now. He explains that a fight is unavoidable, and they might not have a chance to escape later. He tells her to focus on her hidden weapon techniques while he holds the line. Even though she's skeptical, he promises to get her back home no matter what. A heavy footstep crushes the grass at the cave's edge. The leader reveals himself, the 100-kill Blade Wanderer, a man with a silver ponytail and a face marked by scars. He looks them over, noting that Ghost Blade is far too young to be a member of the Tang clan. The boy is just impressed that the mercenaries managed to find their hiding spot so quickly. The Wanderer admits it was easy. He just looked for the suspicious kid buying terrible dumplings at the local market. Ghost Blade actually liked the dumplings, a detail that leaves Sowol completely speechless. The Wanderer points a finger at them and offers a simple deal: hand over the girl and walk away. Ghost Blade doesn't move or speak, his gaze fixed on the enemy. The scarred man narrows his eye, reading the boy's defiance. He takes the silence as a clear answer that there will be no surrender. He asks if the boy has ever heard of his master, the original 100-kill blade. The title belonged to a man who was taken down by the Tang clan 20 years ago. He remembers seeing his master's body riddled with hidden weapons. Sowol flinches as she hears about the brutal methods of her own clan. The wanderer admits his master was a monster who delighted in slaughtering the weak. He knows the Tang clan's retribution was justified, but it hasn't dulled his hatred. To the rest of the world he was a villain, but to this man he was family. The master found him as a lone orphan in the snow and gave him everything he had. Before the end, the master gagged him and slashed his eye to make him look like a victim. The boy had to grovel before his master's killers just to survive the night. It was a calculated sacrifice that allowed the disciple to live on. Now he's gathered a crew who share his desire to return that vengeance 100-fold. He believes that debts of gratitude and grudges are chains that can never be truly severed. Ghost Blade and Sowol listen to the man's grim history in silence. The boy closes his eyes, acknowledging that escaping those shackles is nearly impossible. He sees the world as a vast web where every connection leads to more resentment. His hand tightens on his sword hilt as the weight of the past settles in. He's seen what happens when that web of resentment consumes the entire world. His expression goes cold as he prepares to settle the debt here. The wanderer tells him to step aside, claiming he doesn't want to create more orphans like himself. Ghost Blade ignores the plea and begins to slowly draw his blade. Dark liquid begins to drip from his hand as he prepares to push his young body to its limits. Ghost Blade stands his ground, a dark aura of killing intent pooling beneath his feet. The mercenaries can feel the sudden shift in the air, their confidence replaced by a primal fear. Sweat pours down their faces as they realize they aren't facing a normal kid. He moves with a cold, terrifying precision that leaves no room for error. A mercenary collapses, clutching his chest in absolute terror as the pressure mounts. The 100-kill blade wanderer is paralyzed, unable to believe the raw power coming from someone so young. Sowol watches in horror, barely recognizing the boy who was just feeding her dumplings a moment ago. Ghost Blade's eyes glow a predatory red as he decides to settle this with his own twisted reasons. No sooner had he finished speaking than Sowol immediately threw 2 smoke bombs. A massive cloud of smoke completely engulfed the clearing, leaving the mercenaries unable to locate the pair. Thick white smoke filled the air, and the mercenaries immediately started coughing uncontrollably, terrified that they had been poisoned. The wanderer covers his mouth, but he quickly realizes this isn't any kind of poison he's familiar with. The mist is just a cover for what's coming next. Hidden weapons zip through the fog, finding their marks with lethal accuracy. Blood sprays as several men are taken down instantly, unable to see the attacks coming. The wanderer realizes the mist was just a smokescreen to hide the true lethality of the hidden weapons. One mercenary gets sliced across the throat before he even realizes he's been hit. The survivors are left scrambling in the dark, panicked by the speed and brutality of the assault. Ghost Blade emerges from the mist like a vengeful spirit, his eyes locked on his next target. The mercenaries scream in agony as the boy carves a path through their ranks. He moves with a speed that defies logic, parrying a sword strike and counterattacking in a single fluid motion. A fountain of blood erupts as he delivers a fatal blow to another attacker. His expression remains hauntingly calm amidst the slaughter. The wanderer lets out a guttural roar, finally snapping out of his shock and lunging forward. The 2 blades clash with a violent shockwave that clears the remaining mist from the area. The wanderer orders his remaining men to go after Sowol, while he keeps the boy busy. The mercenaries hesitate for a split second, terrified to move past the blood-soaked kid. After their first clash, Ghost Blade slid backward, his feet carving deep furrows into the hard ground. Opposite him, the wanderer didn't fare much better, landing on one knee. Shadowy black energy begins to wrap around his body, making him look more like a monster than a human. The wanderer is stunned, realizing that Ghost Blade isn't a practitioner of the righteous path at all. He demands to know why someone walking such a wicked path would bother protecting a daughter of the Tang clan. Ghost Blade's eye glows a piercing crimson, as he tells the man he wouldn't understand his reasons anyway. Dark, ink-like shadows manifest behind him, physically manifesting his immense killing intent. He tells the Wanderer that if he can't understand through words, then his sword will do the talking. The pressure he's releasing is so heavy, it starts to crack the very ground around them. He stands amidst the carnage, the absolute master of this blood-soaked stage. Sowol stares in shock, her face pale as she witnessed the true power of her captor. Ghost Blade tells her to stop looking so dazed and remember his warning not to be surprised. She can only stammer back, wondering how anyone could possibly stay calm after seeing something like that. He explains that this is his martial art, the Mad Wolf death-depriving art. It infuses killing intent into his internal energy, boosting his physical abilities to superhuman levels. Ghost Blade looks back over his shoulder, assuring Tang Sowol that the internal energy deviation she fears won't be an issue for him. Sowol stares back with a mix of hope and doubt, finding it hard to believe that anyone can truly control such overwhelming killing intent. Ghost Blade turns away, calmly stating that he surpassed the mere stage of controlling energy a long time ago. Sowol remains silent, a bead of sweat rolling down her cheek as she processes the sheer confidence in his voice. Back to the present, Sowol is being relentlessly pursued by two mercenaries. She turned around, flicked her wrist, and unleashed a barrage of hidden weapons at her pursuers. The hidden weapons instantly sent two of them to the afterlife, but the remaining two managed to parry the attacks with their swords. Recalling Ghost Blade's martial arts, Sowol realized that such terrifying power could only be forged through a life of unimaginable hardship. She clenches her fists, resolving that if he is risking everything to protect her, she must eventually repay his kindness twofold. She watched his back with wide eyes, silently pleading for him to stay safe amidst the carnage. The 100-kill Blade Wanderer raises his massive weapon, his expression darkening as he prepares to crush the rules of the Tang clan. Ghost Blade's eyes glow a fierce red as he readies himself for the mercenary leader's full-scale assault. Their blades collide with a violent ring of steel, sending shockwaves through the air. They lock swords, eyes meeting across the sparks as they test each other's resolve and strength. The Wanderer swings with monstrous power, but Ghost Blade is just as quick to parry and counter. They leap apart, putting distance between them as they reevaluate the battle's momentum. The Wanderer admits he was taken aback by Ghost Blade's inhuman aura, though he notes the boy is only at the first-class realm. Ghost Blade listens impassively, his black robes fluttering as dark energy wisps around him. He retorts that regardless of one's realm, a blade to the heart results in the same death. The Wanderer scoffs, taunting the boy for acting as though he could even reach a master of a higher attainment. The silver-haired mercenary begins to channel red energy into his weapon, manifesting his formidable blade chi. Ghost Blade observes the phenomenon, noting that unlike his own energy, the Wanderer can project power outside his body. This technique, exclusive to martial artists of the peak realm, focuses all internal energy into the blade itself. Unfazed, Ghost Blade adjusts his grip and claims that he has already deciphered the Wanderer's sword style. He charges forward with a roar, his speed creating a sonic boom that rocks the clearing. The Wanderer swings his red-glowing blade in a wide, lethal arc to intercept the young protagonist. Their weapons clash repeatedly, creating a staccato of impacts that light up the darkening forest. Ghost Blade ducks beneath a heavy swing, a line of blood appearing on his cheek from the near miss. The Wanderer grunts in surprise, frustrated that he hasn't been able to land a decisive blow. Ghost Blade flips through the air, his movements fluid and unpredictable as he evades another strike. The Wanderer puts more power into his swings, but his opponent seems to dance around the edge of his reach. Ghost Blade closes the gap again, his eyes focused and his blade ready for a counterattack. Metal shrieks against metal as they exchange a flurry of blows that neither can clearly win. Blood trickles down Ghost Blade's face, but his expression remains as cold and detached as ever. He takes a shallow wound on his arm, but he doesn't even flinch, pushing through the pain to strike back. The Wanderer is perplexed, wondering if Ghost Blade is simply ignoring his injuries or if he's truly lost to rage. A close-up of the Wanderer's eye shows his growing unease, as he realizes the boy's strategy is more calculated than it looks. Ghost Blade continues to rush in, seemingly blind to the risks, yet he narrowly avoids every fatal strike. The Wanderer realizes with a start that Ghost Blade might actually be controlling his dreadful killing intent perfectly. He tries to force the boy back, yet Ghost Blade persists, clashing with him again despite the clear difference in their realms. Sweat beads on the Wanderer's forehead as he starts to feel like he is the one being hunted in this fight. He stares at the dark silhouette of Ghost Blade, questioning if such a terrifying aura can even belong to a human. The 100-kill Blade Wanderer grinds his teeth, realization dawning that his opponent is far more dangerous than he first appeared. Their weapons scream against each other in a desperate stalemate, sparks flying in the dim forest light. The mercenary leader boasts of his experience, claiming he has already adjusted to the boy's oppressive aura. He pushes back with raw strength, desperate to reclaim the advantage and crush his young adversary. Blood spills as the battle continues at a breakneck pace, neither side willing to yield an inch. Thinking he had the upper hand after shattering Ghost Blade's sword, the mercenary leader moved to end the fight, but a sudden surge of dark, ominous killing intent from his opponent caught him completely off guard. The Wanderer's confidence evaporates, replaced by a cold sweat as he looks into his opponent's unsettlingly calm eyes. Suddenly, he finds himself paralyzed, the dark aura manifesting as spectral branches that pin him in place. Ghost Blade stands amidst the swirling darkness, a predator who has finally cornered his prey. The Wanderer realizes with horror that the power he witnessed earlier was only a small fraction of Ghost Blade's true strength. With a cold, merciless gaze, Ghost Blade explains that one should only reveal their true lethality when the killing blow is certain. He tightens his grip on his hilt, the black energy pulsing with malevolent intent as it prepares to consume his enemy. In a final act of defiance, the Wanderer curses the boy, warning him that such dark power will lead to a wretched end. Without a word, Ghost Blade plunges his sword through the mercenary leader's torso with clinical precision. The 100-kill Blade Wanderer gasps, blood spilling from his lips as his life force quickly begins to fade. Ghost Blade leans in, his red eyes burning as he reveals that he is already well acquainted with the embrace of death. Silence falls over the mountain path for a brief moment as the primary threat is finally extinguished. Nearby, the remaining mercenaries continue their desperate struggle, unaware that their leader has fallen in battle. One of them is thrown back by a sudden impact, the forest echoing with the sounds of ongoing skirmishes. Tang Sowol watches from her hiding spot, her heart racing as she realizes she has exhausted her supply of hidden weapons. As she tries to shift her position to find a new weapon, the branch beneath her feet gives way with a sharp crack. She loses her balance, a cry of shock escaping her as she tumbles toward the forest floor. She lands hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her as she struggles to regain her bearings and defend herself. The opportunistic mercenaries quickly spot her vulnerability and charge forward, blades drawn to finish her off. Tang Sowol gets knocked back as the ambush hits, skidding across the forest floor. She looks up in horror, realizing they're completely surrounded by killers. Mercenaries leap down from above, their swords ready to end her life. Sowol scrambles to find her footing, knowing there's nowhere left to hide. She silently apologized to the young hero, knowing she had no choice but to unleash her clan's forbidden poison technique, even at the cost of harming herself. At that very moment, a sword flew in, its steel whistling as it sliced through the air. The first mercenary didn't even have time to scream before the sword found its mark. Another one drops instantly, his lifeless body slamming into the dirt. Sowol watches with her breath held, stunned by his ruthless efficiency. But then, a massive wave of dark, suffocating energy explodes from the young boy. He disappears into a blur of motion, lunging straight for the remaining attackers. One of the men yells out in desperation, swinging his sword wildly at the shadow. Ghost Blade effortlessly parries the strike, his movements cold and precise. With a single brutal slash, he carves right through the man, leaving blood everywhere. His eyes glow with a predatory red light as he fully gives in to his killing intent. Black shadow-like tendrils lash out, shredding anything in their path like paper. The mercenaries are scattered like leaves in a storm, their lives ending in seconds. He slashed his blade into the ground, drawing a clear line between himself and the mercenaries. The clearing falls into a deathly silence, save for the sound of dripping blood. Ghost Blade stood tall amidst the carnage, his gaze enough to freeze the heart of any man. He warned them that anyone who crossed that line would face certain death. The few survivors are paralyzed with fear, literally unable to catch their breath. They stared at the line right at the young man's feet, as a wave of chilling, killing intent radiated from him, ceaseless and overwhelming. He takes a heavy, deliberate step forward, his shadow looming over them. He makes it clear, they've crossed a line and now there's no escape from his blade. Miles away, the Sichuan mountains look peaceful under the clear blue sky. But that stillness is broken by a man moving with terrifying speed through the trees. It's the leader of the Tang clan, and he's clearly on a desperate rescue mission. Tang Sowol leaps across the forest canopy, his face a mask of cold determination. He prays for his daughter's safety, his heart heavy with the fear of being too late. Sowol is his most precious child, and he can't imagine a world without her. He managed to get a lead on her location from his contacts in the beggar's gang. He suspects this whole thing is a targeted revenge plot meant to cripple his clan. Suddenly he stops dead in his tracks, catching a familiar metallic scent on the wind. The smell of blood is thick and heavy, telling him that the battle has already finished. He rushes into the area and is met with a scene of absolute devastation. Corpses are strewn across the clearing, the grass stained a deep, dark red. He examines the wounds, noting the perfect precision of the hidden weapon strikes. He narrows his eyes, sensing that a true monster was at work here. He pushes further into the center of the carnage, his hand tight on his sword. And there, at the heart of the massacre, he finds the one responsible. Tang Sowol stares in shock at the small boy who looks like he's survived a war. Ghost Blade is still wrapped in that dark aura, his presence feeling like that of a legendary master. Tang Sowol is physically paralyzed by the faint, lingering killing intent in the air. He looks at the carnage, wondering if this teenage boy is really responsible for it all. He calls out, demanding an explanation for the sea of blood at his feet. The dark, shadow-like aura surrounding the boy was terrifying to witness. Suddenly, a series of shadowy tendrils shot up, pinning the sect leader in place. Cheon Hwi-da is still deep in his battle trance, his mind far from the present. His eyes are a piercing red, looking more like a predatory wolf than a human. Tang Sowol prepares himself, sensing that this boy could be a threat to everyone. He believes the boy has been consumed by his own bloodlust, losing all reason. He prepares to strike, his own power flaring up as a counter. He demands one last time for the boy to answer him. Cheon Hwi finally hears the voice, and the red glow in his eyes begins to fade. Tang Sowol screams for him to stop, terrified her father might hurt him. Tang Sowol stands frozen as he realizes just how many men the boy killed. With the battle finally over, Cheon Hwi's body begins to give out. He stumbles, the massive strain of his technique finally taking its toll. He falls forward, his consciousness slipping away into the darkness. Sowol catches him in her arms, her face pale with worry as she holds him. She holds him close, her hands trembling as she checks his pulse. She looks up, her eyes filling with tears of relief. She realizes her father is actually here, they're finally safe. Tang Sowol is shocked to see his daughter acting so tenderly toward her protector. Sowol begs her father for a moment, focused entirely on the boy in her lap. He manages to mutter a few words, telling her he can hear her just fine and to stop shouting. Sowol lets out a shaky breath, telling him that he did it, no one is left alive. Tang Sowol still can't believe a mere child could possess such a terrifying, ancient aura. But as the boy passes out, that suffocating killing intent vanishes completely. As he slips into a deep sleep, a familiar smile appears in his mind. Ghost Blade's consciousness began to drift as he saw Sowol, the woman from his past life, asking if he still remembered their promise. She reminds him how much he frustrated her by keeping his name a secret. He looks at her, a version of Sowol with a weary, kind gaze. In this dream, he finally whispers the name he kept hidden, Cheon Hwi. The dream shifts to a beautiful field of flowers, a place of peace they never found. It's a world where the sun shines bright, and the sky is a perfect blue. She smiles, talking about the times they spent struggling through a literal hell on Earth. He remembers the red skis of the war, and how long it's been since he felt the sun. His eyes flutter as he slowly starts to return to the real world. He wakes up in a luxurious room, his body feeling like it's been put through a grinder. He realizes he's heavily bandaged and lying in a bed that's far too soft. He tries to focus his vision, his throat feeling as dry as dust. He hears a sound by the door and realizes someone has been watching over him. The door swings open, letting in a flood of bright morning light. It's Sowol, and she's overjoyed to see that her savior is finally awake. Cheon Hwi blinks his eyes open, the soft luxury of the room a sharp contrast to the cold stone of the cave he remembers. He groans, his body screaming in protest as he tries to force himself upright. Tang Sowol jumps back in shock, her hands fluttering as she warns him not to move. She scolds him for being so reckless, pointing out that his bandages were just replaced and any sudden movement could reopen his wounds. He ignores her concerns, his mind more focused on his surroundings. He asks where exactly they are. With a bright, proud smile, she officially welcomes him to the main estate of the Sichuan Tang clan. Outside, the sprawling complex of the Tang clan sits nestled among the lush greenery of the Sichuan mountains. He takes it all in, the luxury of the room and the peaceful atmosphere a far cry from the life he's known. He lets out a quiet sigh of relief, realizing they actually made it back to her home in one piece. Sowol watches him with a soft expression, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and genuine fondness. She sits back down beside his bed, her playful energy momentarily fading into something more somber. She looks at the bandages covering his torso, nodding that his body was already a map of old scars even before the latest battle. Her voice drops to a whisper as she apologizes, blaming her own weakness for the state he's in. He looks at her steadily, his expression unreadable as he listens to her pour out her guilt. She keeps her gaze down, the weight of her perceived failure clearly heavy on her shoulders. Without a word, he reaches out, his finger gently brushing the skin near her eye. She freezes, her breath catching in her throat as she looks up at him in wide-eyed surprise. He points out the small injury on her face, reminding her that despite all his efforts, she still ended up getting hurt. A deep blush instantly floods her cheeks, her heart racing at the sudden, intimate contact. She frantically waves her hands, making up a clumsy excuse about tripping and falling to hide her embarrassment. He doesn't look like he believes her for a second, but he lets the subject drop, closing his eyes for a moment. She touches the spot on her cheek where his finger was, her face still burning with heat. She lets out a nervous little laugh, trying to break the heavy tension that settled over the room. Suddenly, a mischievous glint returns to her eyes as she has a realization about their current situation. She teases him, declaring that since he's now on her home turf, the tables have turned. He's the one who's been kidnapped now. She stands up and strikes a proud pose, promising to show him exactly how the Tang clan rewards those who save their own. She vows to spoil him with the finest food and the best treatment, wanting to wipe away the memories of that miserable cave they shared. Cheon Hwi just stares at her with a flat, unimpressed expression, his deadpan silence speaking volumes. He asks her if she even understands the definition of the word kidnapped, sending her into a comical fit of frustration. Their banter is interrupted by a sharp knock on the sliding door. A servant's voice rings out from the hallway, announcing that the Tang clan leader has arrived to see them. Someone slides the door open. A man with a teal headband and a sharp gaze steps into the room. He let out a sigh of relief when Cheon Hwi finally regained consciousness, then asked how he was feeling. The young hero looks up, his eyes still a bit heavy from his recovery. This is Dang Yujin, the legendary Poison King and the current leader of the Sichuan Tang clan. HWI sits up in bed and thanks him for the medical care. Yujin tells him not to think much of it, claiming the clan didn't really have to do all that much. He's just glad the boy escaped with nothing more than minor cuts and bruises. He jokes that HWI should really be thanking Sowol, since she's been nursing him day and night. Sowol gets flustered, but Yujin just tells the kid to focus on a full recovery for now. He points out that Sowol needs to look after her own health too, since she hasn't left HY's side for a single day. Embarrassed by her father's words, Sowol starts pushing him right out of the room. She slams the sliding door shut with a loud thud. She stood there sweating and blushing while HWI just watched her looking completely confused. He teased, "How should I thank you, Dang Sowol?" Outside, Yujin continued to tease the lovebirds, mentioning that she had even changed every single one of his bandages by herself. He walked away with an unreadable expression, clearly deep in thought. The Poison King heads down the hall to attend to more pressing clan matters. The sun shines over the massive and peaceful grounds of the Tang estate. Later on, Sowol is back at it, carefully wrapping fresh bandages around HY's arm. He stands up in a clean white robe, and she's thrilled to see him moving so well. They take a seat together to catch up for a bit. Sowol gives a bright, happy laugh, looking more relaxed than she has in days. HWI looks at her and gives a rare, genuine smile of his own. Dusk falls over the elegant architecture as the day comes to a close. Yujin stands out on a balcony, watching the sunset. That evening, HWI gets dressed in formal black robes for a special occasion. He walks into a room and finds a table literally overflowing with gourmet food. Yujin invites him to take a seat, glad to see him looking so much better. He explains the chef went all out for this meal and encourages HWI to eat his fill. HWI takes a bite and is stunned. He's never tasted delicacies like this in his entire life. Sowol notices him looking at the fish and offers to help him navigate all the tiny bones. The father watched the two of them, while Sowol was focused on explaining the proper way to debone the fish. Yujin closes his eyes, his expression becoming a bit more serious. He tells HWI that the entire Tang clan owes him a massive debt of gratitude. He formally thanks the boy for the bravery he showed in protecting Sowol. HWI looks down, saying he didn't do it just for the sake of being a hero. Yujin explains that it's clan law to return a favor twofold and tells him to name his prize. HWI admits that the only reason he ever picked up a sword was because he was hungry. He spent his life fighting just so he could afford to eat food he once only dreamed of seeing. Looking at the feast before him, he says he can't imagine a better life than this. He sets his chopsticks down and looks directly at the clan leader. He says all he really wants is to have someone to share meals with like this from now on. Sowol waits in silence for her father's reaction to HY's bold request. Yujin closes his eyes, letting the idea sink in for a moment. He finally speaks up and calls his daughter's name. She answers, probably thinking he's about to laugh it off. But he drops a bombshell instead, telling her he wants her to get engaged to Cheon Hwi-da right now. Sowol just stands there for a beat, her brain trying to process what she just heard. Then the shock hits her full force, and she turns a deep shade of red. She completely panics, shouting at her dad about how sudden and crazy this whole proposal is. She turns her frustration on HWI, who's still casually eating his dinner. She can't believe he's just stuffing his face while her life is being decided. Yujin tries to calm her down, explaining that he isn't forcing them to marry tomorrow. It's a move to keep a talented guy like HWI close to the clan. He reminds her that when he offered HWI anything he wanted, the boy's only wish was to become family. Yujin adds that after saving her life, HWI has definitely earned the right to make a request like that. Sowol is flustered, wondering if HWI even meant a romantic engagement when he said family. HWI looks at her and says he doesn't think any man would go through all that trouble for a woman he didn't care about. That line makes Sowol practically jump out of her seat. Then he hits her with a question. Does she just not like him? She starts stammering, unable to form a real sentence while her dad watches the drama unfold. Eugen's expression turns grave as he prepares to explain the real reason behind his decision. He tells Sowol that this isn't just about Hwi's wishes, it's actually for her own sake. He brings up her poisoned spirit body, a rare constitution she was born with that most people die for just to try and obtain. He explains that while it's a blessing for a martial artist, it's a curse for her body. If the poison keeps building up, he warns her that she might never be able to have children in the future. Sowol's face falls as the weight of her fate starts to sink in. Hwi watches her closely, his gaze sharp and knowing. Her father tells her he won't force her into anything, but he can't help but worry about her. Sowol tries to reassure him. She says that no matter what happens to her, she's proud of the body her parents gave her and will never regret her path. Eugen is genuinely moved by his daughter's strength and resolve. Hwi clears his throat, effectively cutting through the heavy emotional atmosphere. He apologizes for ruining the moment, but he's got something important to add. He looks them in the eye and says he actually has a solution to her poison problem. Both the clan leader and Sowol look at him like he's crazy. Eugen asks if he's serious, warning him that this isn't the time for jokes. Hwi calmly explains that they just need to restrict the flow of poison energy in her body, and he knows the exact technique to do it. In his mind, Hwi remembers his past life, where Sowol had to carry the entire clan's legacy on her shoulders after they were wiped out. In that timeline, she spent years researching her own body and eventually shared all her findings with him. He stares at her, the memories of a future that hasn't happened yet swirling in his mind. He remembers the way she smiled back then, despite all the pain and responsibility. A small smile tugs at his own lips as he realizes he can actually change things this time. Eugen is absolutely stunned, his eyes wide as he tries to wrap his head around how this kid could know such a thing. He breaks out into a cold sweat, realizing that if Hwi is telling the truth, it changes everything for the Tang clan. Silence falls over the table as the gravity of his words settles in. Eugen stays quiet for a long moment, carefully considering the boy in front of him. He reminds Hwi that he is the clan leader of the Sichuan Tang clan, but Hwi just nods like it's common knowledge. Eugen continues, saying there are very few things in this world he can't do, especially when it comes to poison and weapons. Sowol looks down, feeling the weight of her father's words as he admits how much he failed her. Eugen bows his head slightly, telling Hwi that he's once again deeply in his debt and isn't sure how he could possibly repay him this time. Hwi brushes it off with a humble tone, claiming he only shared information he'd heard elsewhere and doesn't consider it a favor at all. He gives Sowol a small, encouraging smile and tells her they can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Behind him, Eugen knows this was no ordinary favor. Sowol is overcome with gratitude, blushing as she tells Hwi that she has already received far too much from him. The sun shines brightly over the clan's compound, reflecting the newfound hope in the air. Eugen stands up and suggests they wrap things up for the night since the meal is finished. He asks Sowol to head out first, explaining that he still has a few things he needs to discuss with Hwi in private. Sowol waves a cheerful goodbye to Hwi as she skips away, leaving the two men alone in the large room. Hwi watches her leave, his expression neutral, while Eugen looks on with a much more serious gaze. Once they're alone, Hwi turns to the clan leader and asks what exactly he wanted to talk about. Eugen acknowledges that prying into his benefactor's life is rude, but he has one personal question he simply has to ask. He leans in and asks Hwi point-blank if he has any connection to the Heavenly Destruction Star. The Heavenly Destruction Star? Hwi repeats the name slowly, his voice low. His eyes narrow as he processes the clan leader's suspicion, knowing exactly what that title implies. His gaze hardens as the ominous title sinks in, the air in the room suddenly feeling much heavier. Yujin explains that he finally understands the source of the worry that Dang Jinshin must have felt. He describes it as a disposition that grants talent rivaling the legendary heavenly martial body, but at a terrible cost, uncontrollable murderous intent. Unlike the heavenly martial body, which a martial artist can master and control, the heavenly destruction star is a curse of karmic slaughter ordained by heaven itself, something no human can truly overcome. HWI takes a calm sip of his tea, listening as Yujin finishes his explanation of the dark fate associated with the star. Yujin clarifies that he's not doubting HY's character, he's just deeply concerned. HWI tells him it's fine and that he understands the worry. HWI cuts straight to the point, asking if Yujin is wondering if he's already learned the forbidden martial arts linked to that destiny. Yujin doesn't deny it, simply answering with a firm indeed. He admits that the thick, murderous intent he felt from HWI is something he's never encountered before, even from the most dangerous villains of the unorthodox sects. He explains that having murderous intent flow directly through one's internal energy is completely unheard of in the martial world. He was genuinely shocked to see HWI withdraw that terrifying aura instantly, the moment he heard Sowol's voice. Even though HWI seems fine now, Yujin warns him that the possibility of him losing control and going astray is too high to ignore. HWI listens in silence, his expression unreadable as the clan leader makes his point. Yujin makes a surprising proposal. He offers to give HWI the Tang clan's own internal energy cultivation method if HWI agrees to give up his dangerous martial art. He even promises to provide whatever spirit medicine is needed to help HWI rebuild his foundation from scratch. HWI looks at him for a long moment, the offer of such a prestigious cultivation method being something most would die for. "I see, I understand," HWI says calmly before respectfully declining the offer. A stunned Yujin asks him why. HWI tells him that no matter how steep the path, he'd rather climb a mountain he built himself than one given to him by someone else. He adds with a small, confident smile that even if he stumbles, he'll be fine as long as someone is there to hold his hand. Yujin is struck by the boy's conviction. He closes his eyes and accepts the answer, nodding in understanding. He tells HWI that he'll verify the mnemonic for Sowol's condition, but he's still burning with curiosity about where HWI learned it. HWI tells him it was simply a fated encounter and promises that the time will come when he can share the full story. Accepting the mystery for now, Yujin tells HWI he's kept him long enough and encourages him to go get some rest. As HWI stands to leave, he drops one last bombshell, casually telling his father-in-law that he'll see him again soon. HWI walks away with a smirk, leaving a completely stunned clan leader behind. Yujin sits there frozen, a cold sweat breaking out as he realizes the implications of what the boy just called him. From a distance, Yujin's voice booms with indignation as he shouts that he isn't mentally prepared for the father-in-law title yet. HWI just smirks, teasingly shouting back that he can't hear him. An overhead view shows the serene and orderly layout of the Sichuan Tang clan estate under the morning sun. Bright and early, Tang Sowol stands outside HY's room, calling out to him and wondering why he's still in bed when the sun is already so high. Inside, a disheveled Cheon Hwi-da blinks away sleep, looking utterly exhausted as the morning light spills into his guest quarters. He pulls the door open, looking half-conscious as he bluntly asks Sowol why she's wearing such a fancy outfit. Sowol is taken aback, grumbling that she spent so much time getting ready for him, only to be met by a fiancé with sleepy, half-closed eyes. Cheon Hwi just stares at her, his expression unreadable as he processes her complaint. He remarks on how naturally she's accepting her role as his fiancé now, causing Sowol to immediately flare up with embarrassment. She screams in frustration, asking how he can be so shameless when he was the one who said those embarrassing things first. HWI gives her a soft look, admitting he only said it because he truly likes her, and then presses her again for the reason behind her special dress. Sowol pouts and turns away, declaring that since it's not fair, she won't tell him until he's properly prepared. She starts shoving him back into his room, commanding him to wash up and change quickly so they can get a move on. The scene shifts to the bustling streets of Sichuan, a wide view showing the dense rows of traditional buildings nestled against the mountains. Down in the market, the atmosphere is festive and full of life, with shoppers and merchants crowding the lantern-lined streets. Sowol strikes a confident pose, her face beaming with excitement as she officially declares the start of their tour through Sichuan. HWI follows behind, his arms crossed as he notes how incredibly enthusiastic she seems for a simple walk through the city. Sowol huffs, warning him that if he remains a party pooper, she won't give him a second chance, but HWI quietly notes that he's actually looking forward to it. She looks around with a smile, remarking that the province feels like her very own backyard. Sowol adds a playful jab, suggesting that if he's going to marry into the family as a matrilocal son-in-law, he'd better get familiar with the surroundings. HWI looks on in silence, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the lively city. He thinks back to his previous life, remembering the devastation the heavenly demon brought to this land. Seeing it so full of life now is a powerful reminder of his second chance. Sowol spots a familiar face at a stall and calls out to Uncle Jang, asking him how his business is faring. The merchant is surprised to see her back so soon from her martial emergence, and Sowol can only manage a flustered, awkward response. Uncle Jang asks about the man accompanying her, and Sowol doesn't hesitate to introduce HWI as her fiancé, leaving the poor merchant in a state of shock. The shopkeeper looks like he's just seen a ghost, his eyes bulging and jaw practically hitting the floor. He nearly jumps out of his skin when he hears the guy standing there is actually Lady Sowol's fiancé. Cheon Hwi keeps it brief and blunt, giving his name with a face that says he'd rather be anywhere else. Sowol isn't having his attitude, stretching his cheek while reminding him that just acting polite isn't a real greeting. He doesn't look too bothered, casually mentioning that bowing his head just isn't something he's used to doing. Sowol warns him that once the merchants start gossiping, rumors about her fiancé will spread across the whole province. She gets a playful look in her eyes, offering to take a crack at guessing exactly what's going on in that head of his. She figures he's either worried about the wedding or feeling out of his league, but he just thinks she should open a fortune-telling shop. She tells him to stop worrying about what people think and just focus on the heroics he's already pulled off. She reaches out and picks up a delicate piece of jewelry from the merchant's display. She points out that when it came time for a reward, he skipped the gold and treasures and said he wanted her instead. Cheon Hwi just watches her, probably wondering how she managed to spin his bluntness into something romantic. She puts on a beautiful dangling earring, the light catching the gems as it hangs from her ear. As a daughter of the Tang clan who owes him her life, she admits she's starting to feel the same way he does. She turns and strikes a pose, showing off how the new accessory complements her outfit. She gives him a beaming smile and asks if he thinks it looks good on her. He actually lets a small, genuine smile slip through for once. He hits her back with a smooth line, saying he'll be too busy looking at her to notice anything else in the province. The merchant is totally won over, giving the kid a passing grade for having such a silver tongue. The guy is practically blushing harder than Sowol, completely charmed by the sweet words. The two of them continue their walk through the town, the mood between them feeling much more relaxed. They stop for a quick meal at a local spot, enjoying the food and a rare quiet moment together. After eating, they head back towards the estate with Sowol leading the way with a skip in her step. The massive rooflines of the Tang clan estate loom ahead, looking as traditional and imposing as ever. She's happy the local food is to his liking, but he admits he grew up with so little that he'll eat anything. She looks at him with pure pity, thinking about all those tasteless, fastness pills he had to survive on in the past. They step into a quieter part of the complex, the high walls making the air feel a bit more formal. They both stop in their tracks when they hear a commotion coming from the courtyard. The main square of the estate is packed with people, and the atmosphere feels heavy and chaotic. Sowol is confused by the crowd until it suddenly clicks that today is finally the day they've been waiting for. A group of clan experts in green robes are standing together, looking like they're prepared for a major mission. Among them is Dang Yujin, the clan leader, looking stern as he oversees the assembly. Then Dang Chung spots her and comes charging over with a huge, happy grin. Cheon Hwi just stares at the newcomer, having no clue who this emotional guy is supposed to be. Deep within the walls of the Tang clan estate, the air was thick with the usual weight of family politics. Dang Yujin couldn't hide his shock at the news he just heard. The clan leader, Tang Wui, simply closed his eyes and confirmed it with a nod. Yujin mentioned that while there were rumors about Sowol, he didn't expect her fiancé's position to be given away so easily. Wui clarified that it wasn't a snap decision. He'd actually done his homework on the guy. He explained that Cheon Hwi grew up as an orphan, picking up a sword at a young age, and eventually wiping out the entire Red Death faction at just 15. The boy even used a dangerous cultivation method to suppress a killing intent, so strong it should have broken him by now. Looking at his track record, Wui considered him a vicious bastard, even by the standards of the wicked. Yujin was still skeptical, noting that the man he met didn't seem quite like that monster. Wui smiled, pointing out that while the blade in the boy's heart was sharp, it wasn't pointed at them. The kid even helped them figure out how to manage the side effects of Sowol's poisoned spirit body. Yujin had to admit the whole clan owed him a massive debt for that alone. He wondered if just a betrothal was enough of a reward. Wui explained that he'd offered anything, but the boy only wanted to become part of the family. Yujin laughed it off, thinking about the simple romanticism of youth. He figured a guy who is cold to the world, but risks his life for one girl is exactly the type Sowol would fall for. Wui gave a knowing look, nodding that it was a bold statement coming from a man with 4 concubines. Yujin just nodded along, ignoring the jab. He pointed out that Wui had been single for 10 years and suggested it was time for him to find someone new too. The leader shut that down immediately, telling him to forget it. He shifted the mood, stating they had much more important things to worry about right now. Yujin looked at him, curious about what could be more important than family drama. Just then, a voice from the door announced that the Dark Soul squad leader was requesting an audience. The atmosphere in the room sharpened as the focus shifted to the clan's business. Elsewhere in the estate, the mood was much more emotional. Dang Chung was a mess, apologizing to his sister for being away while she was in danger. He squeezed Sowol's face, convinced she had lost weight from all the suffering. Sowol tried to tell him she hadn't actually lost any weight, but he wasn't listening. He raged about how he would have slaughtered anyone who touched her if he'd been there. She awkwardly mentioned that it was fine, because Cheon Hwi had already taken care of everyone. Cheon Hwi stepped forward, finally introducing himself to the overprotective brother. Sowol quickly backed him up, explaining that she only made it back because of his help. Cheng was momentarily confused by the news. He immediately switched gears, offering a formal greeting and thanking the young hero for saving his sister. Cheon Hwi watched him closely, realizing this was indeed Sowol's older brother. He remembered that Cheng was one of the few who risked everything to help Sowol escape in his previous life. Seeing them together, even a guy like Hwi could feel how much they cared for each other. Cheng continued to praise Hwi's skills, insisting he stay at the estate to rest before leaving. Sowol tried to interject, looking a bit nervous about the misunderstanding. The clan leader walked in, interrupting the warm welcome to set things straight. He told Cheng that this wasn't just some guest. This was Sowol's fiancée and a future member of their family. Cheng just stood there, completely frozen by the sudden revelation. Cheng stood there, his brain short-circuiting as he repeated the word fiancé like a broken record. Cheon Hwi didn't miss the chance to lean in, greeting his new brother-in-law with a smug little smile. The shock on Cheng's face was so intense it looked like he'd been hit by lightning. He turned to his father in a panic, but Tang Wui just nonchalantly confirmed that he'd given his blessing. Cheng exploded, refusing to accept that his sister was being given away to someone she just met, regardless of his help. Hwi casually added fuel to the fire, mentioning they'd spent a whole month alone in a cave after he kidnapped her. The keywords kidnapped and live together were enough to send Cheung into a complete tailspin. Sowol was mortified, yelling at HWI for bringing up unnecessary details while her brother collapsed from the stress. Cheung started sobbing, mourning the loss of the little sister, who used to only care about the sweets in his pocket. Sowol snapped back, reminding him that she'd stopped doing that years ago. Tang Sowol cleared his throat, signaling that the comedy hour was over and it was time for actual clan business. The group stood outside for a moment, the weight of the upcoming discussion hanging over them. Sowol suggested they head inside, as the courtyard was far too public for what he had to say. They gathered in the main hall, the air turning cold as the clan leader prepared to drop the real news. He cut straight to the chase. The demonic cult was officially confirmed as the ones behind Sowol's kidnapping. The news hit the room like a physical blow, leaving Sowol and HWI in stunned silence. HY's mind raced, remembering how in his past life, the investigation into this incident had just fizzled out into nothing. Sowol continued, revealing that the cult was hiding out in Guangdong province, information obtained through the Hao clan. He noted that the Hao clan cooperated purely to save themselves from being caught in the crossfire. Cheung didn't need to hear more, demanding they march to Guangdong immediately to wipe out the bastards. Sowol agreed with the sentiment, but he had a specific condition for the plan. He ordered Sowol and Cheon Hwi to stay behind at the Tang clan estate, while the others handled the mission. Sowol was shocked, arguing that since they were the ones targeted, they should be part of the revenge. Her father was firm, telling her he didn't want either of them pushing themselves after everything they'd just endured. Sowol made it clear that he'd only summoned them to provide an update, not to ask for their participation. HWI stepped in, addressing Sowol as father-in-law and siding with Sowol's desire to go. Sowol insisted they couldn't just rely on others to settle their own scores if they wanted to grow as martial artists. Sowol scoffed, finding it ironic that HWI would call him father-in-law and other in the same breath. He told them to leave the heavy lifting to the rest of the clan and stay put. Sowol started mumbling to herself, clearly frustrated that her contribution was being sidelined. Her father called her name, his voice softening with concern. He admitted he simply didn't have the courage to risk her life again, so soon after getting her back. The vulnerability in his voice left Sowol speechless. Later, on the bridge, she complained that it wasn't fair for him to play the worried parent card to get his way. HWI was deep in thought, realizing that a direct confrontation might be his only chance to find clues about the heavenly demon. Sowol looked at him, asking if he was really planning to just give up and stay behind. HWI admitted he was surprised. Anyone else would be too terrified to step foot outside after what she'd been through. She confessed she was scared, but running away would mean the end of her path as a martial artist. She wanted to be a daughter her clan could actually be proud of. HWI looked at her, seeing a spark of resolve that he hadn't expected. He smiled, deciding that it was much easier to ask for forgiveness than permission anyway. He took a step forward, suggesting a new plan to get them where they needed to go. Cheon Hwi looked at Tang Sowol with a mischievous glint in his eyes, declaring that he was kidnapping her right then and there to Guangdong province. Sowol could only stare at him in stunned silence, her heart skipping a beat at his bold and unexpected announcement. Under the pale light of a crescent moon, the city streets below remained quiet and unsuspecting of the secret plans being made. The shadows of the surrounding buildings stretched across the empty courtyards as night fully took hold of the Tang clan estate. A heavy, rusted axe blade scraped harshly against the stone floor, producing a grating sound that echoed through the dark, damp corridor. Inside a dim hideout, the bandaged axe man scratched at his neck in frustration, complaining about the insufferable heat and the endless waiting. He grumbled about how he couldn't stand sitting still, his patience wearing thin as he fiddled restlessly with his massive weapon. He questioned where the Tang clan was, nodding that they were supposed to have arrived days ago according to their original plan. A metal gauntleted hand slammed down on a crate, silencing his whining with a sharp and commanding thud. The seductive cultist stood up, her expression cold and lethal as she told him to focus on the prey they had already trapped in their web. Far away, the moon shone brightly over the rooftops of the Tang clan's territory, marking the passing of another silent hour. Sowol clutched her robes tightly, her mind drifting to her father and wondering if his group had already made it past Chongqing. Hwi rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, guessing that the main force of the clan was likely making good progress on their march. He turned back to Sowol with a nod, asking if she was finally ready to start their own secret journey to the front lines. The night was perfectly still, but the air was thick with the anticipation of the daring departure they were about to attempt. They made their way toward the stables, where a single guard stood watch near the horses' stalls under the moonlight. The guard was clearly struggling to stay awake, letting out a long, tired yawn as he leaned heavily against a wooden pillar. Before he could even finish his yawn, Hwi moved with blinding speed, striking the man's pressure points to knock him out instantly. The guard slumped to the ground without making a sound, leaving the path clear for them to take the horses they needed. Sowol looked at the unconscious man with a bit of concern, asking Hwi if he was truly sure about this reckless plan. Hwi just gave a casual shrug, reminding her that since he was technically kidnapping her, all the blame would fall on him. Seeing his unwavering resolve, Sowol took a deep breath and promised to do her absolute best to see this through with him. A small, confident smile played on Hwi's lips as he looked at his companion, satisfied that they were finally on their way. They reached the horses, but Sowol quickly noticed Hwi wasn't moving toward one of his own and asked where his mount was. Hwi looked away sheepishly, admitting that despite all his legendary skills, he actually had no idea how to ride a horse. Sowol's jaw dropped in complete disbelief, wondering why they had even bothered raiding the stables in the first place. Hwi suggested that Sowol take the lead while he sat behind her, making her wonder who was really in charge of this kidnapping. As they prepared to mount, Hwi's mind drifted back to his past life, a time when horses were a luxury he could never afford. He remembered that by the time he could finally afford one, he had already gained the power to run much faster than any animal. Sowol sighed and told him to just get on, realizing they didn't have much time to waste on his lack of equestrian knowledge. Hwi climbed up behind her, and the sudden close proximity sent a jolt of nervousness through Sowol, turning her face bright red. She teased him, asking if he'd had this ulterior motive from the very beginning, but Hwi only gave her a cheeky, unbothered reply. She called him surprisingly sly for a hero, though Hwi countered by asking if she really wanted him to get off and walk. Meanwhile, across the border in Guangdong province, the atmosphere was much more tense as the Tang clan arrived. The scouts looked down from the surrounding heights at a large, fortified estate hidden deep within the trees. Soft footsteps crunched on the grass as a group of elite warriors moved into their final offensive positions. They moved like ghosts through the darkness of the night, their blades drawn and ready for the signal to strike the target. Atop a nearby roof, several masked figures from the Dark Soul squad stood watch, their eyes fixed on every exit. Tang Sowol stood at the head of the formation, his gaze icy as he asked for final confirmation that this was the cult's nest. The Dark Soul squad leader stepped forward, reporting that they had the entire place completely surrounded and were ready for his word. A member of the Hao clan bowed deeply to the Poison King, confirming their intelligence reports before slipping away into the night. With the target finally in sight, Tang Sowol prepared to unleash the full, terrifying wrath of the Tang clan on the unsuspecting cultists. Tang Sowol stood before his men, his voice heavy with reflection as he addressed the Dark Soul squad leader about the long path they had traveled from Sichuan. He looked off into the night sky, admitting to himself once again that the immense burden of leading a martial clan was far from a simple task. He considered the weight of his duties, having to coordinate with the Hao clan and look after his companions even when his heart burned for a swift, personal vengeance. He mused that it wouldn't be proper for a clan leader to let personal feelings dictate his path, yet the urge to simply wipe everyone out alone was nearly overwhelming. Now that he stood directly before the enemy's gate with nothing left to block his path, He wondered if any of those formal rules and obligations truly mattered anymore. The Dark Soul squad leader watched his lord in silence, sensing the cold, simmering rage that was finally beginning to surface through Tang Wui's calm exterior. The squad leader bowed deeply, reassuring the Poison King that his men would maintain a perfect perimeter to ensure that no word of tonight's events would ever escape. Tang Wui closed his eyes for a brief moment, offering a quiet, icy word of thanks to his loyal subordinate before preparing for the final strike. The heavy wooden gates of the estate stood silent in the darkness, unaware of the devastating and toxic storm that was about to break through them. Suddenly, a massive and violent explosion tore the entrance apart, the sheer force of the blast sending smoke and debris screaming into the courtyard. Inside the estate, a group of confused and panicked cultists scrambled to find their footing as the dust from the breach began to choke the air around them. The warriors within the hideout looked on with growing dread, their faces pale as they realized that their hidden sanctuary had been compromised in a single, brutal moment. Through the thick, swirling clouds of dust and smoke at the gate, a lone and menacing figure began to slowly emerge, walking with a lethal sense of purpose. Tang Wui stepped into the light, his eyes burning with a cold, murderous intent that seemed to freeze the very blood in the veins of his enemies. The seductive cultist and the bandaged axeman stood paralyzed by the sight, their eyes wide with absolute shock at the sudden and overwhelming arrival. The bandaged axeman clutched his head in a state of pure panic, unable to understand why the legendary Poison King had come for them entirely alone. He scratched frantically at his skin as he grumbled about how an orthodox sect leader shouldn't be acting so recklessly, his mind reeling from the breach of tradition. Tang Wui continued his steady advance, declaring that saving face was a luxury reserved only for the right people, and that today they would all dissolve into poisonous water. The bandaged axeman let out a pained groan as he began to scratch his neck violently, the first signs of Tang Wui's invisible toxins already starting to take hold. He screamed in desperate fury, blaming their situation on the faulty information they had trusted after waiting and rotting in that hideout for so many days. In his terror, he realized their only choices left were to return to certain death at their master's hands, or be slaughtered by the Poison King right where they stood. The seductive cultist watched him with a look of pure disdain, mocking Tang Wui for doting on his daughter and letting personal feelings weaken his standing as a martial artist. Tang Wui met her mockery with a look of utter contempt, stating that those in the demonic way who couldn't even save themselves had no right to worry about anyone else's future. Deep in the demonic cult's hideout, the seductive cultist, a woman with dark hair and a revealing top, admits they're basically scraping the bottom of the barrel to survive. Her partner, the bandaged axeman, stands by as she mentions their plan was to take the Tang clan's daughter down with them, even if it meant their own destruction. But looking at the chaos unfolding outside, she refuses to just sit there and melt into a puddle of poison. In the courtyard, the cultist subordinates are already screaming as the assault kicks into high gear. The Tang clan leader, Tang Wui, a powerful man with a goatee and teal headband, stands completely alone as dozens of enemies dive at him from the rooftops. He just calmly stomps his foot, and a thick green haze starts bubbling up from the stone floor. Within seconds, the entire area is swallowed by a wall of toxic fog. The men caught inside can't even get a scream out before the poison hits them. It's a horrific sight. The gas is so potent it's literally dissolving the skin off their bones in midair. Skeletons tumble to the ground as Tang Wui, the Poison King, watches the carnage with cold eyes. But the cultists had a plan to break the stalemate, hurling an explosive bomb directly at Tang Wui. Tang Wui reacted instantly, realizing these were the legendary Thunderbolt bombs. A massive explosion erupted right where Tang Wui had been standing, shaking the entire stronghold. Fire and smoke consume what's left of the courtyard, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. Looking down from a high vantage point, Tang Wui couldn't help but gasp at the sheer destruction caused by this little toy. He called them cunning bastards as the dust settled. Sensing that it's game over, the two cultist leaders finally decide to cut their losses and run. The seductive cultist and her partner smash through the wreckage to make a desperate escape. The Tang guards spot them immediately and start shouting for everyone to cut off their retreat. But anyone who gets too close is instantly butchered in a spray of blood as the two force their way out. The bandaged axeman is fuming, cursing at how pathetic this whole operation turned out to be. His partner tells him to pipe down and focus on living to see another day first. She's completely dialed in on the exit, desperate to leave the Poison King's reach behind. Her foot splashes right into a thick pool of blood as they sprint through the devastated halls. They suddenly skid to a halt, eyes wide with shock at the figures blocking their path. The terror on their faces is clear. They didn't expect anyone to be waiting for them here. Out of the shadows, a figure in black robes with a ponytail drops down with his blade already drawn. It's the protagonist, our ghost blade, unleashing a massive circular strike that halts their retreat. The two cultists drop into a defensive stance, sweating as they realize they're trapped. The ghost blade lands gracefully alongside Tang Sowol, a girl with dark green hair, nodding they've arrived at the perfect moment.